this idea of alignment is really important. I think the analogy here is rowing a boat. If not everyone's lined up and rowing in the same direction, of course you're going to go in circles, you're going to go or one direction or another. But when you're all lined up, you're going to go as fast as possible in the direction where you want to go. That's what RevOps really does. RevOps creates alignment. And it's alignment in how you measure the data, it's alignment in how you use that data, it's in alignment in how you enable the sales and success and marketing teams.
Welcome to RevOps Champions, a podcast designed for revenue professionals looking to advance sales and marketing initiatives through the role of RevOps within their organizations. In each episode, we feature leaders who are leveraging technology to drive operational efficiency, revenue, and improve the customer experience. Listen in and learn how to become a better RevOps leader within your own organization. Let's get started.
This episode digs deeper into the sales ops component of RevOps. My guest is Channing Ferrer, VP of Global Sales Strategy, Operations, and Sales Acceleration for HubSpot. He runs a global organization of operations and sales professionals. He's a highly successful go-to-market leader with extensive experience developing and growing international teams and implementing systems across global SaaS companies. Prior to joining HubSpot, he has an extensive sales leadership and sales operations experience across several technology companies. Channing, will you please tell us a bit about your role and how you ended up at HubSpot?
Sure, definitely. So I've been at HubSpot for about 5.5 years. And just by means of background, I really started in more of a pre-sales role, actually, when I got into sales. Prior to that, I was in consulting, doing management consulting. And years ago, decades ago, maybe even, I joined a small software company in a pre-sales role and moved very quickly into sales. And I realized I didn't think I wanted to be in sales. I didn't think that was kind of my calling. I didn't understand sales, though. And the reason I moved quickly into sales is, as anyone does in a small startup, you don't have any customers. So the first thing you do is you have to sell. So I jumped in and started helping to do that, and I realized I was pretty good at it. I asked a lot of really good questions, and I think that's what good salespeople do. So fast forward a few years, I ran a bunch of sales teams at Capital IQ. We grew up fairly quickly, ran a bunch of our international sales, and then eventually we merged with Standard & Poor's, and I started running sales ops, and I was asked to kind of take that on as the head of sales ops, started running the sales org. So that was my first kind of foray into ops, and it was great. I learned a ton. We integrated two large teams together, and we did a whole bunch of other things. Then I went on to run sales at another small company for a bit, went on to another software company, ran sales, and not the whole sales, ran kind of part of the sales team there. And they asked me once again to take on sales ops as well. So I was running this mid-market sales group, which was about half of the sales team, the BDR team, and sales ops. And did that for a little while, and then moved over to HubSpot and been running sales ops and strategy and sales acceleration, which is a group of folks that kind of sit around the quota carriers. It's anything from business development to pre-sales. So my journey's been interesting. It's been a mix of ops and sales leadership throughout most of my career.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'd like to dig in, a little bit deeper, as we. This is a RevOps show, and obviously sales ops is a massive component of that. So we'll dig a little deeper into that, and I think your experience and background is going to be super valuable as we do that. So, but what I always like to start with, though, Channing, is challenges. So we all have read the books and seen the stories of overnight success, but of course we all know that with overnight success comes typically years and years of planning and challenges until we see that success. What is the biggest challenge you've had to deal with from a sales ops or RevOps perspective in your current role? And it's clear that you and the rest of the revenue team at HubSpot have had incredible success over the 5 or more years that you've been there. But what are one or two of the toughest hurdles you've faced and I'm guessing overcome?
Yeah. So there's every year there's a series of challenges, I'd say, and as we go through planning, which I'm sure we'll touch on later on, I think of it as little rocks and big rocks, and the little rocks are kind of the pebbles. We always have things to do in ops. We're moving things forward. We're pushing these rocks forward, and the little rocks are a little easier to push. But the big rocks are the hard ones to push forward. You need a lot of hands and a lot of people involved and true alignment actually to get that big rock moving. So we talk about a lot of our initiatives based on little rocks and big rocks. And I think what really, Brendon, you're getting at, what are those biggest rocks, that we've had to challenge or tackle? I'd say, let me go back to probably the early days at HubSpot, and this one actually fits a little outside of planning, but we rolled it out during the planning season. The first challenge I saw when I joined HubSpot was we had great marketing and sales alignment. There's always a little room for improvement, but really strong marketing and sales alignment. But one of the things that was really noisy on my team, the ops team, was lead rotation rules and ownership, ultimately, lead ownership rules. So we would have leads that would go to, say, our mid-market team, but the corporate team would say it should be theirs. Lead that would go to one verticalized segment that we had versus maybe it shouldn't go to that verticalized segment. Partner versus direct, where there was conflict. So we had a lot of conflict, and my team was spending tons and tons of time dissolving that conflict. So it was tricky because it was just so much time spent, not just my team, but by the reps. The reps were constantly looking for ways to get their hands on more lead flow. And that really took them off the phones. It took them out of the field. And really where we want our reps is talking to customers, not trying to negotiate ownership on things. So after doing some digging on this one, we rolled out a policy that I love. And at some point, we'll probably need to evolve it and adjust, but we called it wig-wig. What you get is what you got. And meaning, if you get a lead rotated to you, it's yours. We're not going to negotiate. We're not going to argue. If you're in small business and you just got GE rotated to you, so be it. You take GE, and when we do our territory recarve next year, we'll move it around then. But when a lead comes to you, you get it. So that solved a lot of this noise, and it really got people more focused on don't try to go and fight for more lead flow. Just take what you have and work it, and it is what it is. And yeah, occasionally you're going to see things that are going to go to the wrong person. Oh well, let's move on. So that was kind of the first one, and that worked really well for us. Then I'd say the next, just another example of a challenge was customer selling. So interestingly at HubSpot, of course, we've been very focused historically on small business. We've been moving more and more upstream toward larger businesses. But in that small to mid-sized business focus that we've had, we do a lot of our business for new customers. We get a lot of new customers, a large volume of new customers coming through. And our sales team likes that. We've kind of engineered the sales team around the new business side. However, the sales team had not historically been very strong at customer selling. And our customer success team was very focused on keeping those customers around. Small businesses, sometimes they churn a little more aggressively than large companies for a variety of different reasons. So customer success was very focused on retention. Sales was focused on new. The gap there was that install-based selling. How do you kind of grow something over time? And we needed to really rethink how to do this. And this was a really good learning experience. So one idea that we came up with was, can we roll out a customer selling team? And we'll have kind of a hunter-farmer type of model. And then we'll also have customer success that keeps the customers happy. So we put together this farmer team, this team that would, after 12 months, would take over customers. And all they would do is sell into the customer base. But they'd have to wait 12 months. The new business team would focus on the first 12 months. And it didn't work that well. And it was interesting because we're like, well, the problem, we looked at the data all different ways. The problem clearly was post 12 months customer selling. We'd actually do a good job at selling in the first 12 months, but it's after 12 months is when the big drop-off seemed to occur in customer selling. However, the big aha oversight for us was we weren't solving for the customer's needs, we were solving for our needs. We were really focused on how do we try to drive more revenue post 12 months. The customer didn't want to have a new person. They built relationships. They wanted to maintain those relationships. They were getting confused over what we call swim lanes. Who would they talk to for what reasons? We had a renewal manager. We had a customer success person. Now we had this customer sales person who they had to build a new relationship with. And it was getting confusing. So we actually pulled that back and said, this isn't the right solution for us. And it worked okay, but not great. But it definitely had this kind of, again, wasn't solving for the customer challenge. So what we did in lieu of that is we really just refocused how do we think about our customer success team helping identify opportunities, pass those over to sales. How do we get our renewal management team less focused on just the point of renewal, but over the full life cycle of the customer for looking for opportunities and then surface those back to sales. So we've gotten a lot more lead flow, install-based customer lead flow going back to the sales engine, and then the sales team closes those deals very efficiently, actually. And it's really helped with our install-based selling, helped with our revenue retention numbers, because of course that's driven off of customer selling, and it worked well. But again, there was a big learning moment in there that the farming function kind of didn't really work all that well for us.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all good stuff, and I actually like how you started that with the analogy of the little rocks and the big rocks, because we have a huge following, especially here in Minnesota, but it's obviously catching on nationally and internationally, which is the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS, or Traction, as you might know, where of course all the big challenges or opportunities for each quarter are referred to as rocks. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because we run on EOS at Dennewill, and a lot of our clients do too, and we do a lot of our planning for clients around their rocks. And obviously, if there are any technology or revenue related rocks, that's where we support them. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So let's just back up, I guess, a little bit for a second, because there are some folks listening who are potentially familiar with sales ops, but might be unfamiliar with RevOps, which of course is part of the reason for this podcast is to educate people more about RevOps, which of course includes sales ops, marketing ops, customer service ops, and then you can talk about operations ops, finance ops, etc. But RevOps, in our definition, is the people, processes, data, technology / systems that power and control a business's revenue engine through alignment, which you actually mentioned earlier as one of your rocks or challenges, typically between sales and marketing, but of course that goes through other teams. But through the alignment and unification of those teams, data, processes, and systems. Do you have a definition of RevOps that you'd like to share before we continue?
Yeah, I gotta say, I think that's a great definition. I mean, that kind of sums up a lot of it. The thing I would maybe build on top of that definition is, I think it's okay if people look at RevOps a little differently company by company. And I think one of the things that I hear a lot of companies struggling with who are maybe moving towards RevOps or have RevOps in place is centralization versus decentralization. And how important is it to centralize everything in RevOps, to have everyone kind of one unified operations team, one unified enablement team, one unified strategy team maybe, and one unified data team. And again, the alternative is that more decentralized approach where you have the kind of functional teams. You have a sales ops team, you have a customer success ops team, and is there duplication in doing that? I don't think there's a simple answer to this. And I think bringing the teams close together, having them all sit under one function of RevOps is very important. And the reason being actually is in the data. I think that's the most important thing. So you want to have one centralized repository for data, and you want to be able to leverage that data in a kind of unified way. And I think that's one of the main driving forces around RevOps. I think enablement might be a secondary component to that, where also you want to enable your teams in a unified way. You want to enable the sales team with a clear direction that aligns with how you're enabling your customer success team. Again, if the customer success team is focused on creating leads for sales, make sure that they understand how those two things work together, for example. So this is a long answer to your question, but I like your definition. But again, I think this idea of centralization versus decentralization is a really important element to RevOps. And I think it is important to acknowledge there isn't a simple answer to it. I personally like a hybrid model. I think it works well for us at HubSpot, where we have some centralization, but also some decentralization. I like having a sales ops team that sits close to sales, because the sales leadership team wants to have someone they can trust and rely on and work closely with target setting and quota setting and analysis. And similarly, we want one centralized data team, actually, who is kind of sitting at the middle of all the data and making sure we're leveraging and using it across customer success and sales in a similar way. So I think as you look at that definition, which Brendon, you laid out there, it was a great definition. I would just overlay the concept of centralization versus decentralization within that.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, we always talk about meeting people, businesses where they are, and I like that idea of do what works for your organization, because like I often say, once you've met one business, you've met one business. And because every business is unique and you need to do what works for you. So, yeah. So, so having said that, and I completely agree with you on the data component needing to be centralized, or as we're talking, a lot about at least in the HubSpot ecosystem, but I'm sure it's been talked about beyond that too. There's if you have two sources of truth, that's one too many, right? So, and that of course refers to where your data is housed. There can only be one single source of truth. So, in your mind, if you had to sort of wrap up the biggest benefits of a RevOps strategy, whether it's as you said, a hybrid one or not, what are the biggest benefits in your mind of a RevOps strategy?
Yeah, again, I think it comes back to this data concept, just alignment around data. And I think there's two words that are really important. It's alignment and data. And you have to make sure that your data you're leveraging, data the RevOps team is leveraging, is consistent. We're looking at it the same way, and we're aligned around the message that we're gaining from that data. And that's why the alignment is really important. So when we look at a measure sometimes, and when we might not have had RevOps, let's say the marketing team might have looked at that measure differently than the sales team, or the sales ops team even versus marketing ops. And maybe one example of this is the SLA. Marketing might say, we're hitting the SLA, great, rah, rah, we're doing well. Sales looks at it and says, well, wait a minute, you're hitting the SLA on a volume basis, but not on a quality basis. And our conversion rates are dropping off. Because I'm just making something up here. But I think that's where you get the misalignment, where if marketing's going and celebrating at the end of the month, but sales is like, we missed our number, we're only at 95%, but marketing's at 110% of SLA, you got clear misalignment there. When you have RevOps sitting together, you're looking at the data the same way, and you're recognizing the successes and the misses together, and then representing those in a holistic way. So I think that's why, again, the data, but also the alignment around how to leverage the data.
Yeah, and I'm sure everyone who's listening, who's responsible in that area for that area, it resonates with what you're saying. As far as the quantitative and qualitative, data that you need for those SLAs to work between sales and marketing, or sales and customer success, etc. So, moving on, I realize this is also true for HubSpot, but the reason we now focus on RevOps at Dynamico is because we believe it's a better go-to-market model. And according to some Gartner research that I was seeing last week, they talk about how 75% of high growth companies will be using a RevOps model by 2025, which of course we still have a few years to get there, but you're seeing a huge adoption, and of course we're very excited about that. We believe that the RevOps model gives high growth organizations a competitive edge, which is why you would do this. Otherwise, why would you do it? And so, what would you say are the factors in RevOps that create that competitive advantage?
Yeah. So I'd say again, this idea of alignment is really important. And when you've got all teams kind of looking and leveraging information in a similar way, like we just talked about, you create alignment. And that alignment gets everyone moving in the same direction. I think the analogy here is rowing a boat. And you've got a whole bunch of people kind of rowing in a crew boat. If not everyone's lined up and rowing in the same direction, of course you're going to go in circles, you're going to go or one direction or another. But when you're all lined up, you're going to go as fast as possible in the direction where you want to go. And that's what RevOps really does. RevOps creates alignment. And it's alignment in how you measure the data, it's alignment in how you use that data, it's in alignment in how you enable the sales and success and marketing teams. And I think that's at the core of RevOps is alignment. Because without RevOps, when you sit in a more decentralized, and without RevOps decentralized, or even a completely decentralized kind of structure, then often that alignment is missed, and that's where you lose efficiencies. Yeah.
So I guess another way, so using that same sort of rowing analogy, whether you're a crew of 4 or 8 or whatever it is, you want to get from A to B as quickly as possible. So from the beginning to the end. So great, excellent. I mean, again, alignment is it's no surprise that, of course, data and alignment seem to be the common themes coming through here. So moving on. So as we're now well into Q4, annual planning is well underway for many of us. You do a lot of speaking and education in this area. What are some of the most frequent questions you're asked, and what are the most effective things, as far as sales operations? What are the most, so coming back, so leaving RevOps aside for now, coming back to sales ops, what are the most the biggest challenges, and therefore the questions that you get around sales ops?
Yeah, I get a lot of them, and this time of the year, as you mentioned, they're all top of mind for me these days. So I'll break it into a couple categories, and we can spend a little time maybe on each of these. I'd say sales comp is probably the first one. Always, how do you want to think about sales comp structure? The next one I'd say is territory structure, and how do we handle territory and lead assignment based off those territories. Headcount planning would be the third one. Target setting, how do you go about setting the targets? And then the last one is kind of all-encompassing, but it's really change management. And this is the one that often I don't get enough questions about, that I think people should ask more about too. So let me go through each one of these topics, actually, because again, they're kind of chunky, each one of them. On the sales comp side, we're midstream on trying to wrap up our planning, and we try to get that done by early December, early end of November even. But sales comp, is a topic that tends to carry throughout planning. It's how do you want to incentivize the sales team, and what do you want to do, or what changes might you do? The thing that I get, the way I think about sales comp, and we could spend a whole session here on sales comp, but I'll kind of give you the high level. I think sales comp, the first principle in sales comp is keep it simple. And one challenge I see in sales comp structures often is complexity. People trying to over-engineer a comp plan and say, oh yeah, we want this to happen, but we want that, and we want that. And then you build all that into your comp plan, and the reps don't even understand how the comp plan works. Keep it simple. Only have two components, two to three components. 3 is the max, by the way, in your comp plan. And when I say components, that's what are you driving? Is it just selling of recurring software? Is it selling of services? Is it implementation fees or something? Again, I prefer 2 as the max, but you could go up to 3 maybe. And then I would pay significantly for overperformance. It's self-funding, so have it set up where you can have overperformance. You want your top sales rep to make more than the manager. You want the top sales rep to be maybe the highest earner in the company, if you can get it set up that way, because then you're going to get really good sales reps, and that'll help drive growth overall. So those are kind of two basics. Keep it simple, and overpay for overperformance. And then I'd say on top of that, we could spend time in terms of how to set up the comp plan and the structure, and how to roll it out. One thing I do get concerned about is changes every year. I try to minimize those changes. We're always going to see a need for some change, but change in the comp plan always has unforeseen repercussions. So we'll try to do our best job poking holes. We try to involve some sales reps to help us poke some holes in a comp plan change. But there's always going to be that one rep who figures out the loophole to most effectively monetize the comp plan that doesn't align with maybe what you want to do in the business. So when I roll out a change, number one, I try to minimize the changes, and number two, I give myself an ability to adjust that change again. And this gets a little into the change management piece. But I do think it's important to have that flexibility to make an adjustment down the road if it's not working the way you expected. The next one on territory structure. So this is an interesting one, and I think I've put a lot of thought on this one over the past couple of years. Actually, we did make some changes. Let me backstep. There's really 2 basic ways to think about a territory, and one is a predefined territory that can be geo-based, that can be alphabetical, but it's kind of the predefined model. And then the other one is more of a rotator model, and the rotator model means just next available. You have a series of reps, and they're getting the next available lead, and you just kind of rotate around everyone to get the next up. And both have some advantages and disadvantages to them. That rotator model means you're going to have speed to response. You'll always have someone working that lead right away. The downside of the rotator model, it's very hard to do prospecting in a rotator structure. Whereas if Brendon, you and I owned all the US and we kept rotating, you don't really know what you're going to get next. So you don't know if I start prospecting something, you could get that rotated to you versus me. Sure. So you have to have some way of ownership of prospect accounts in addition to the rotator. And then on the geo-based level, it's very good for prospecting. You own your geo, you can call into your zip code, your area code, whatever it might be, and call on it. But if you decide to take a vacation, no one's touching those leads because those are your leads, and you're gone for the week and you'll come back. Or if you're on a phone call or you're in a meeting or whatnot, you're busy for a day, you'll be slow to respond probably to those leads. So one thing we've done recently is we rolled out a hybrid approach, and this was kind of a little bit of an experiment that we ran, and it worked really, really well for us. Again, I would say caveat this with what works for us doesn't always work for everyone else, and vice versa. What works for others doesn't work for us always. So I think it's important to kind of look at through the lens of your business. But we said we'll have a team, a sales team, that'll be on a rotator, but within a geo. And so think in North America, our small business team, they're covering just a couple geos. So they have a series of zip codes that's the equivalent of eight reps on a team. And so they have enough zip codes to give enough lead flow to those 8 reps. But they don't each own an individual zip code or set of zip codes even. They'll own that. The collective team will own the collective series of zip codes. And for us at HubSpot, we also do mostly inside selling. We're mostly on the phone. And obviously with COVID, I think a lot of people are operating that way. So what we were able to do is align the teams to these zip codes that aren't necessarily all in the same geographic region. So you can grab some zip codes from maybe the Southeast, you grab some zip codes from the Northeast. We tried to keep time zones relatively similar. But typically we see a much higher conversion rate, a much higher average sale price out of the Northeast than we do the Southeast. And that's a lot of companies often do see that. But that way we can kind of blend things together. So you're not getting stuck with maybe a set of zip codes that arguably aren't as good of zip codes as another sales team does. You can kind of blend it together in terms of quality. So that's worked very well for us, this hybrid model, and it's an interesting idea. It takes a little bit of operational rigor to roll it out, but that's just another idea on the territory side. Then in terms of headcount, that was the third one I mentioned. So headcount is another area that I think deserves a lot of rigor and often is overlooked in terms of how much rigor is needed there. As you continue to scale, and companies that get to this point of scale, headcount is a really critical point. You need to make sure you've got the right headcount lined up, you have the right recruiting engine. Headcount, by the way, doesn't mean just sales is ready for it, it means your recruiting engine is ready to hire those people, and you understand your attrition risks. And I think that's the piece that sometimes can get overlooked. So when you look at a scaling business, you've got to make sure we're going to hire 10, 20, 30 reps, whatever it might be, this coming year, and that's only new reps. Then you say, well, we're going to see maybe a 20% attrition rate on our current reps. So you have to plan to hire for those reps as well, and your recruiting engine has to be ready to hire for those attritions as well as the planned new hires. So, and then you have to monitor when that happens. And my take on this is, as you get to a certain scaling point, you need to just forecast attritions and hire into them, as opposed to wait for an attrition to occur. If you wait for an attrition to occur, then you have to run your hiring cycle, which might be 60, 90 days, ramp them. And by the way, there's a by the time offers given to the point of starting, there's usually another 30 days in there. Ramp that person for anywhere from 3 to 9 months probably to get the benefit. So if you build a little bit of financial buffer into the plan to be able to hire ahead and monitor that, you're going to see the attrition occur. It might not occur in the month you thought. You might have planned on it in February and it happens in April. But that attrition is going to happen over time. And once you get to a certain point of size, and I'm not sure what that is company by company, but this is something we've been doing for a while now, is we hire into assumed attrition. We don't wait for the attrition to occur. And it really does help us maintain the right headcount.
This is an interesting one because, again, this is where a great example of hundreds of potential examples of where your internal operational efficiency of not having the reps starting in order to continue to operate your business the way that it should be operated, to give your customers the experience that they deserve and need. That's just one example of if you don't get this right, eventually the customer is going to feel it in having a poor experience with a new rep because they were pushed too early to start speaking to a customer and maybe couldn't answer the questions that the customer was expecting.
Right.
And then,
Right.
so anyhow, but I'll let you continue.
Yeah, no, and I was going quickly there, but yes, that's a great point. So I think the next one, kind of going back to this, these planning topics, the next one is target setting and how we set our targets. And again, this is, I'm sure, top of mind for folks as we're middle of that planning season here. The way that I like to think about target setting is I do think it's important to do a bottoms-up model. Tops down is typically going to come more from a financial view, the board maybe view, saying let's try to grow at 20, 30, 40, 50%, whatever it might be. And we think we can do that because we did it roughly last year, and we see the TAM is huge in our market or something along those lines. Usually it's a little softer. It's kind of like, there's a number we're trying to go for. We want to hit the rule of 40, and thus we're going to grow 40%. The bottoms up model is saying, can we actually do that? Let's validate this. And when I think of bottoms up, I start with demand. What's our demand? Marketing demand, that is. How much marketing demand do we have coming through? And how much of our bookings next year is going to come from marketing demand? So is that going to be 20%, 50%, 80%? And again, let's look at last year. How much came from marketing demand last year? And if that was 50%, great. We could probably try to carry that through and make sure marketing is kind of comfortable with that approach. So we'll start there. We'll say, all right, so we assume we're going to kind of sustain about the same percent of bookings coming from marketing demand. Marketing sees demand growing at X percent, and usually they'll get there by looking at maybe traffic growth or other factors that lead into their demand growth. And then from there, we can say, all right, now we understand marketing demand, how we're going to make up the rest of that bookings number. That's usually going to be, again, through a mix of rep sourced, BDR sourced, customer selling, and pull that all up. So we'll do a model that kind of says, here's a bottoms up. Here's all the different sources of our demand. Here's how we're going to get to our overall number. Here's how many heads we need. Here's the productivity per rep to help us understand what each headcount can do in terms of performance. Maybe there's some incremental, this is usually the big variable, how much incremental performance can each rep give, and compared to year over year, are they going to be 10% more productive, 20% more productive, and why? And I think that's an important one, because sometimes people just assume 20% more productive because we've got some great products coming out. Well, by the way, all your competitors have great products coming out as well. So that doesn't mean you're necessarily just going to be 20% more productive. But let's get really clear on the why there if you see an increase in rep productivity. And so that's kind of the bottoms up model. I think it's really important to do that, just to help validate growth expectations. Yeah. And then just to close it out, I think the last piece to all of this around planning is change management. And when you think about all these things we're talking about, that feeds into quota assignment, it feeds into territory changes, it feeds into maybe some changes in ratios, BDR to rep ratios or SE to rep ratios, those sorts of things that are important to the rep's success. You have to roll out those changes. And those changes are going to be usually a mix of good and bad things for the rep. And usually when we think about change management, I always encourage my team to put yourself in the shoes of the sales rep. How are you going to receive this if you're a sales rep? Is this good news or bad news? And if so, how good versus how bad? So we go through this kind of puts and takes exercise. We'll list all the changes out and we'll say, is it good or bad? And then we'll try to quantify that. And, it's as simple as just putting a starring system. Is it a 5-star change or a 1-star change? And that's in terms of kind of the impact, positive or negative. So that could be 5 stars negative, it could be 5 stars positive. And then you begin to look at that and how does it add up? And you can actually just kind of do a quick sum on these numbers and saying, is it net neutral? Because I don't want to roll something out that's net negative to the rep. I've got to have enough positives in there that counterbalance the negatives. And negatives, a big negative is always going to be a quota increase. So do we have enough positives to offset that kind of negative? So we'll do that. We'll do just a simple little math equation there to see, are we feeling comfortable with that? We'll get we'll make sure, of course, throughout the process, we've got good alignment with our sales leaders on it. And then we'll get in front of the reps and we'll explain it that way. We'll explain it that there's some positives and negatives and be very upfront about that. And by the way, before we do that, we get managers, make sure the managers are fully aware as well so they can help communicate. Because the first thing rep does is go talk to their manager about it. So you got to get the managers on board. You don't want them to see that for the first time at the same time a rep does. So again, change management I think is really important when you think about planning and as you lead into sales kickoffs, which are probably coming up and people are scheduling those now as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just to recap, so the 5 things you talked about as you're doing planning for 2022, and I guess every year, are sales comp, territory structuring, headcount planning, target setting, preferably bottoms up, and then the change management piece of that.
Yep.
And I think one of the things, as I was listening, Channing, to your response there, what it reminded me of is you mentioned the word rigor, and to me it just shows, if you do put in the time during your planning. So don't rush the planning, because your planning is what sets the tone for the level of success that you're going to have in the coming year. So if you do take shortcuts on any of these 5 components, or whatever other components people out there might be using as part of their planning, it's probably going to bite you in the butt, or the chances of it biting you in the butt are higher if you don't put in the rigor. And I love that sort of overall message of make sure you put the time into the planning in addition to the rigor. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And again, I have plenty of questions I could go into, but I want to make sure we stay on track here. So, and it kind of sort of brings me into a question around which happens at this time of the year. I know for ourselves, as I mentioned earlier, we run on the EOS traction model, and our quarterly planning is typically just what do we need to do, what got done in the last 90 days, what are we going to get done in the next 90 days, and we don't do too much that's strategic or innovative until we get to the annual planning, which of course is happening now. And right now, I think because of what happened last year, and of course this year, there's been still a big hangover from the pandemic. There's a lot of innovation happening, especially of course in the technology space. Is there something innovative that you've been working on, at HubSpot, I guess, that you're excited about and that you can share for 2022?
Sure. So, again, every year we've got our little rocks and big rocks. So I'll talk probably about some of these bigger rocks, which I think aligns with some of the innovation. The first one I'll talk about actually is just partner. I think we're really leaning heavily into our partner ecosystem. We see a lot of opportunity to continue to grow and evolve the partner ecosystem. We see huge value in partners like yourself and helping HubSpot to grow. So there's, and I won't get into
which of course we're very excited about that. Just having been through Partner Day a few weeks ago, and this happens every year. It's so invigorating, the opportunity that HubSpot is creating for us. So we're very excited.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're really pumped up about partners and what we can do there. And then I'd say the other one is kind of a broader theme that's tied to our 3-year strategy. And it's something we spent a lot of time over the past year really kind of thinking through, refining, experimenting a bit around. And we call it our bimodal go-to-market approach. And so bimodal means we kind of are doing 2 different things at once. And one mode is selling into very small businesses, small and very small businesses. And we've done a fairly good job of that over the years. We've kind of figured out a lot of motion there, a lot of the motion there. We try to automate as much as we possible when we sell there. We've got a product-led growth team that helps facilitate that. We've got a freemium model that helps drive a lot of that. So that engine is humming, but we need to continue evolving that, because you can't just stay status quo there. We have to continue to move and evolve. The other mode is upmarket, and how do we continue to grow and sell into larger businesses? And we're seeing a lot of success selling into businesses of 500, 1,000, 2,000, plus employees, and these are traditional corporate enterprise businesses. And but balancing those 2 things is tricky. Trying to figure out how to sell down market, but also sell effectively up market is a challenge, and it's something that we're walking an interesting tightrope on, and I think we're finding that right balance. But it does mean different approaches to marketing. It means different approaches to selling. We need to coach and teach our sales reps different ways. There's team selling versus individual selling, we talk about it as, and they need to be capable of both. And we need to have our systems and processes ready to help support that bimodal motion, and we need to make sure we have our individuals reps, marketers, customer success, ready to support both. So I think that's been something that's been really interesting and fun to see us learn, evolve, and grow at this kind of bimodal go-to-market.
Yeah, and of course, we've lived through that ourselves, through our 7.5 years, being a HubSpot partner, where in the early years until about 3 years ago, we were definitely focused on further downstream, as you say, small businesses who just needed a marketing automation tool or a website that was integrated. And of course, in the last 3 years, we've pivoted pretty dramatically as the CRM, the Sales Hub, the Customer Service Hub, and of course more recently the Operations Hub have been rolled out, because now suddenly we can implement that full stack at far larger companies, and we have a bunch of $1 billion plus companies now as clients of ours, where we're implementing and integrating HubSpot into the rest of their tech stack, which we are. That's really where we are happiest right now. But of course, we're sort of stuck in the same bimodal dilemma where our legacy clients, as we call them, they got us to where we are, and we want to make sure we keep supporting them. And of course, a lot of them are growing and scaling, and we're able to implement these new technologies for them too. But then we're also working with far bigger companies that we weren't speaking with before. So yeah, it's a great one, and I'm sure but between us, between HubSpot and the partner program, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, good stuff. So I know we've been talking about this as HubSpot for years now, that all companies, no matter what industry they're in, should go to market like technology companies. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to make sure I had you on today, was because Brian Halligan has been talking about this for years now, that giving examples of companies that the market might see as technology companies, but they're really not technology companies. They're taxi companies, or they make mattresses, or you name it. They're not technology companies, but they're going to market as technology companies. So what do you think are some of the ways that, let's say, more traditional industries, brick and mortar industries that don't see themselves as tech companies, how would you say that they could go to market thinking like a technology company, and what might be the benefits of that for them?
Yeah. I think at the core of what we do at HubSpot is we ultimately help our customers to make more educated decisions, and so we build software around that, and we do that through a variety of ways, through marketing, through customer success, through sales, and in other ways. And I think as I look at a traditional kind of brick and mortar or manufacturing type of business, how can they replicate some of the things that we've done and learned, and for that matter, other SaaS businesses do and learn, and especially the most successful ones. And I think one of the things that we've learned at HubSpot is just keeping the customer at the center of everything you do. And I think this applies also rather effectively at other types of businesses. And this can be, again, anything from a shoe store. And Zappos is an example of a shoe store where they're not selling a subscription model. We'll just use them as an example. They're selling shoes, and they've done very successful at selling shoes, albeit online. But what they do is they keep that customer front and center, and they solve for the customer constantly, and they're constantly looking for moments of customer happiness, and that creates a reoccurring customer. And that's what a SaaS business is. It's automating the reoccurring element of the customer. So the more you can keep that customer front and center, the more you're going to get that reoccurring component, and that's the real strength of the SaaS model, where you get those higher valuations, and we get that stronger growth is the customer reoccurring. And again, a SaaS model is just locking the customer into reoccurring. But even in that case, you want to make those customers happy, because we don't want them just to reoccur. We want them to reoccur and buy more, by the way. Don't just buy one pair of shoes, buy 2 pairs of shoes, buy shoelaces, buy socks, buy all those things that sit around side. And by the way, the third thing you want them to do is refer your friend to say, hey, why don't you go buy some shoes at this company? And again, I'll continue with my Zappos analogy. Zappos does a great job at that, and they built a great model on that, but it's so applicable to any other company as well. And you kind of translate SaaS businesses, HubSpot type business, to my Zappos scenario, but it can apply very similarly to other businesses as well. Is keep that customer front and center, make that customer happy, have them come back, buy more of the same thing they bought already once, have them buy more of something else, and then have them refer people. And that's the simple model.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I completely agree. And I think maybe to flip that around, so one of the metrics that I learned early on as a HubSpot partner, doing some training with Brian Halligan back in 2014, were the two metrics that tech companies follow with being CAC and LTV. And I think LTV is really what you're talking about here now, that I think any business in any industry could learn from, is lifetime value of a customer. And if you want to think about value to the business, think about value to the customer. And I think that's a kind of the flip side of what you were saying about being customer centric, putting the customer at the center. So I love that. I think that's a great place to end here, Channing. Thank you so much for being my guest today. You shared some truly valuable things that even I'm going to be implementing here at Dynamico, and I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot more than one nugget. So thanks for being here. I guess to close it out, I'm going to let you give me your wish for our listeners for 2022.
Yeah, sure. And again, Brendon, my pleasure. This was great talking. I love chatting through a lot of these topics. I'll say my wish is, and this is something I think I just put something up on LinkedIn a couple weeks back on this, is always be experimenting. I think that's a really important element of success for any business. So as you think about what you're doing in 2022, get that plan in place, but be ready to experiment on top of that, and build time, capacity, even budget into your plan next year for some experimentation, because that's the way you can keep growing and expanding.
So experiment and do right by the customer.
Exactly. Those are the two themes.
Awesome. Channing, thanks so much. I look forward to chatting again soon. Be well and take care.
Thanks, Brendon. You too.
Thank you for checking out this episode of RevOps Champions. This show is powered by Dynamico, a HubSpot consulting firm helping businesses level up the technology systems that power their ability to scale. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow RevOps Champions wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Or visit RevOpsChampions.com to get immediate access to all of the latest episodes.